The Druid class in Dungeonborne is a highly mobile assassin with low health. They are locked into the Elf race, which allows you to crouch to recover health very slowly over time, as well as to go invisible. Whether poking, engaging, flanking, or disengaging, the Druid has the skill expression and diversity to do it all. In this video, I will cover the Druid's abilities, passives, builds, playstyles, and some bonus tips at the end. Let's talk about the abilities. The Druid currently only has one ability in its Q slot, Primal Awakening, which allows you to transform into a panther. While transformed into a panther, your movement speed increases by 100, and your E ability becomes Shadow Assault. When activated, you leap forward in a burst of speed and deal damage to enemies upon landing. This consumes some of your resource, Primal Energy, 40 of it. If you do damage, you recover 20 Primal Energy. Basic attacks also recover 20. In the E slot, you have two options. There is Force of Nature, which summons an immobile Trent lasting for 30 seconds that will attack enemies in range and will grant you a shield upon successful attacks. The second option for your E is Regrowth, which applies a health over time effect similar to the potency of a health pot. This gives you a ticking heal every second for 30 seconds. Currently, I think Force of Nature, or the tree, is more useful, and Regrowth is really just nice for PvE or Ratting the Storm. Let's talk about the passives. If you get your dex up to 36, you will activate Predatory Senses, allowing you, while in Panther form, to see the enemy player's auras up to 25 meters away through walls. This only works for 3 seconds and then goes on a 5-second cooldown. When reaching 27 stamina, you activate Nature's Breath, which gives a 150-point shield to your tree with Force of Nature, or to your target when casting Regrowth. Intelligence has two passives. If you reach 44 int, you activate Natural Swiftness, and the cooldown of your E ability will be reduced to 30 seconds. The tooltip is a little misleading currently. What it means is your cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds, originally at 40 seconds, down to 30 seconds. Even the timer in-game is bugged to still show 40 seconds, but as you reach the 30-second mark, it will instantly refresh, shown here. The second passive at 81 int is called Hunter's Focus and gives your Shadow Assault ability, or the Panther's Pounce, more primal energy back when damaging enemies. This means that with this passive, you will recover all of the primal energy spent to pounce if you damage an enemy. And your last passive is your Will passive called Seed Pods. At 45 will, your E ability will be able to store a second charge, meaning you can have 2 trees up at a time or 2 heals of regrowth. To clarify, the regrowth won't stack twice on the same target, it will just refresh the duration, meaning this would be more for team play if using regrowth. When prioritizing between passives, I would go for either the Dex or Will passive first. The Will passive with the tree is going to be a game changer for PvP, while the Dex passive's info is invaluable. You can third party with ease, sneak up on unsuspecting targets, or use it to completely avoid an incoming enemy. Personally, if I can only hit one passive, I choose Dex, but realistically I go in with both Dex and Will, even in budget gear. Next, I would go for the Int passive for the cooldown reduction, pretty much ensuring you always have a tree available if played correctly. And lastly, if you can afford it, the Stam passive giving a shield to the tree is, in my opinion, just okay. Trees really aren't focused unless you put them far away from you and give the enemy nothing else to look at. Sometimes they can die to AoE damage, such as a fighter's Whirlwind, but that is really more on poor placement of the tree. Again, this isn't a bad passive, but if you are playing your trees correctly and the enemy is attacking the tree and not you, it should be an easy win. As far as the second int passive goes, I have never personally built enough int for it. It's too heavy of an investment, in my opinion, to get back the same amount of primal energy as you would for just a basic attack. These opinions are mostly focused around the tree. If using regrowth, I would prioritize Dex, Stam, Intelligence, and Wisdom in that order. Let's talk about your loadout. Druids wear leather and can use staffs, daggers, maces, and orbs. Dagger/mace and orb will give you a blocking option when not in Panther, as well as a slow on charge attacks. Orb also gives some max life and will, so great stats. Staff gives int and elemental damage. Int also increases elemental damage, so this is a huge buff to elemental damage. Your damage while in Panther and your tree's damage is considered shadow damage, which is under the umbrella of elemental damage. So I personally like running 2 staffs for the big increase in damage. I also generally stay in Panther for melee fighting, so I don't get much use out of the dagger/mace and orb combo. But this is really up to personal preference and playstyle. As always, I would bring as many health pots/bandages as you feel necessary, as well as your favorite flask or combo of flasks. Thunderclap and Shield flasks are my favorite. With the Dex passive, you will usually get the say in how your engagement starts, so you could play a little more safely with Shield pots, or go for a huge burst of damage with Thunderclaps. Again, this is personal preference, but you could always bring both, keeping in mind that they share the same 20-second cooldown. The last thing I will talk about for loadouts is secondary stats/set bonuses. This would be the stats like critical strike chance or fire resistance, etc. When looking for good pieces of gear, it can be daunting to know what all of the different stats mean in relation to your character. So for Druid, we will break down the most important, in my opinion, secondary stats. Damage is always a great choice as it literally buffs all of your damage. Elemental damage is great because this will include your staffs, your Panther, and your trees. It will even include the ice damage from your charged dagger/mace and orb attacks, but it won't buff your physical damage from those weapons. Shadow damage is great for Panther/tree. And lastly, I would say Shadow Penetration, which will help negate shadow resistance of other players, letting you hit them even harder. Notable mentions that are just all around good would be max life, crit strike, and crit damage. Lightning damage and fire damage if using those staffs, or physical/ice damage if using dagger/mace and orb could also be good. As far as set bonuses go, it is also up to your personal playstyle, but there are some standouts in the current meta. Storm Rage for the burst damage and CC, Tiny Torment for a little extra damage, Pity of Death for a free res, and Drunken Alchemist for a little extra something. Okay, let's talk about playstyle. You are very squishy, but have high burst damage and mobility with your Panther form, as well as some poke with staffs and tree. If using the Dex passive, you should see most of your engagements before they happen, meaning you can usually catch an opponent off guard or at least set the stage with a tree. My general playstyle is to spot an enemy, decide if I want to shield or thunderclap to engage, poke them with lightning or potentially a tree if I want to follow up with Panther. This will send them into one of 2 reactions. If they are now low health due to all of this, they will most likely try to get out and reset, but luckily we are highly mobile and can catch them. We can continue to pester with lightning as they make their escape, or throw down a tree to cut them off and pounce on them. The other reaction is usually due to them still being pretty healthy or just going into a panic and rushing you. If so, I will backpedal and hit them with as much lightning as I can, eventually ending and placing my second tree down somewhere I am willing to take the fight and switching to Panther for melee/pounce until they are dead. The general rule of thumb is you don't want to fight in melee unless you are under a tree. The trees will provide extra damage and shields for you upon hitting the enemy. Only the tankiest of classes can get away dueling you under a tree. So long as you get some opening hits on them, you should be fairly safe under your trees. If you do see them start to run and you have no trees left, you could chase, but the safest option is to have at least one charge available before any relocating. Also, knowing other classes and what abilities you have to look out for before burning your pounce too early. Some examples would be jumping on a fighter before they use Whirlwind, trying to jump away from a DK before they use Grip, or jumping on a Pyro before they have used their Pushback. A couple of bonus tips to help maximize your damage and increase your chances of winning your PvP. When you change into Panther, you want your staff or highest attack weapon out. Notice how much lower the damage is when I switch into Panther with my staff out versus the dagger. Your tree has a consistent, slow attack pattern. However, when you pounce on an enemy that is inside of your tree's range, it will instantly attack that same enemy. This can amount to huge amounts of burst damage, especially if the enemy is under both trees. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this content, please consider liking and subscribing. If you want to watch me play Druid live, check out the description for my Twitch and Discord links. I stream 6 days a week at 8 p.m. Central. Alright, love you. Have a good one.